This presentation summarises a recent air quality analysis and geological assessment of Inner London conducted by Collins Consultancy on behalf of the Environmental Agency of London, with the aim of providing them with quantitative data, better informing their decision on where and how deep a new tube line should be constructed. This tube line will increase the accessibility of public transport and hence improve the air quality across Inner London by reducing the need to travel by car. Where possible, datasets used have been produced by reputable sources, such as the British Geological Society or London Data Store, to help minimise inaccurate results. Firstly, the geology beneath London was reconstructed using borehole data provided by the British Geological Society and digitalised by J.D. Paul. This data was first desurveyed and then plotted using the QGIS Geoscience plugin. The interpolation of this borehole data via the triangulated irregular network method permitted the creation of digital elevation models for each of the geological layers. A limitation of this interpolation method is that it creates a surface formed by triangles of nearest neighbour analysis, which can yield results with a jagged appearance. This results in differences being seen in the thicknesses implied by borehole logs and the thicknesses demonstrated by the modelled geological layers. This is particularly pertinent when boreholes terminate prematurely within groups such as the London Clay and Lambeth Group. Boreholes which terminated within these groups were removed from the dataset before interpolation in order to give a smoother and more accurate representation of the geology in 3D. Furthermore, the density of borehole data analysed shows a clear bias towards East Central London. The lack of borehole density in southwest and west of the city may have resulted in less reliable results in these areas. A digital elevation model was not created for the chalk layer, as only 6 boreholes across the whole extent of London reached the base of the chalk, meaning any interpolations made would have been done so using too few data points. Digital elevation models and their statistics were also created for the thicknesses of the 4 layers used in the geological model. The deepest of the 4 layers is the Thanet Sand Formation, which is the oldest Paleogene deposit in the London Basin. It sits unconformably on top of the chalk due to a period of uplift and erosion, which accounts for 50 million years at the end of the Cretaceous period. The thickness of the Thanet Sand Formation is consistent across London, ranging between 5 and 15 metres in general, with one anomalous pocket of thicker deposits in north-east London, which may be a result of the interpolation method used. Above the Thanet Sand is the Lambeth Group, which consists of the Upnor, Woolwich and Reading formations deposited 55 to 56 million years ago. The formations of the group are highly variable in lithology and each consist of varying proportions of gravels, silts, clays and sands, representing the higher variability of their environment of deposition. The thicknesses of the Lambeth Group varies considerably across London, with pockets of thicker areas being dispersed sporadically across London, but a general thickness of between 10 and 20 metres is observed. Overlying the Lambeth Group is the London Clay, which is a blue-grey, often bioturbated stiff clay. The general homogeneity of the London Clay provides a good medium for subsurface drilling. It is thickest in West London and begins to thin considerably towards the southeast and in areas of northeast London. Lastly, the thickness of Quaternary deposits were also modelled, which predominantly consist of the river terrace deposits left by the Proto-Thames and drift from the Anglian glaciation. The thickness of the drift and gravel deposits across London generally range between 0 and 10 metres, with 2 small pockets of up to 20 metres being seen in northeast London. The addition of tube line and tube station depth data shows which geologies have been preferentially drilled through in prior underground construction. It is evident from the reconstruction of the central line in 3D that it exists almost entirely within the London Clay. This can also be seen in 2D using the cross-section tool in QGIS. The Victoria Line is well known to dip into the Lambeth Group in central London. Here, a 50-metre buffer has been produced across the width of the line, and the geological layers have been clipped to this buffer, allowing the visualisation of the dip into the Lambeth Group at Warren Street and Euston Station. Analysis of the geotechnical properties of the units within this model was kept to the 2 layers in which the London Underground generally persists. Understanding their properties is vital as they dictate their general potential to host subterranean structures. The London Clay has been preferentially chosen due to its consistent bulk density, which increases with depth, and its general impermeability, which reduces the vertical downward seepage of water and the need for pumping during construction. The Lambeth Group has been shown to have been sporadically drilled through when necessary, but can be a source of unforeseen expense in drilling projects. This is primarily due to its high variable moisture content and bulk density. This variation can be seen in the Lambeth Group beds through the results of standard penetration tests published in a paper by the British Geological Society. These tests imply that the Upnor Formation would cause serious drilling disruption if encountered. They also demonstrate the lower standard penetration resistance of the London clay, in which only 13% of standard penetration tests included more than 50 blows. On top of their numerical geotechnical properties, there are also geological hazards and other logistical issues related to tunnelling in these two lithologies. Shrink-swell behaviour can be observed in the London clay, as its montmorillonite content causes the alternate swelling and shrinking of material. Another consideration necessary in the London clay is the presence of discontinuities. Although previously believed to be homogeneous in nature, natural fissures and scour hollows exist below the surface of the clay. Natural fissures permit the ingress of water, which can clog digger shields with sticky clay. Drift-filled scour hollows also pose a risk when drilling through the clay. The presence of some of the hollows have been mapped by Flynn et al., but encountering a steep-sided hollow filled with water-bearing quaternary gravels unexpectedly presents a serious flood risk to any drilling works. The Lambeth Group also contains features limiting tunnelling capabilities. Water-bearing sand channels require extensive dewatering measures before drilling, especially when in direct hydraulic continuity with local aquifers. Sand channels can also interact with the London clay above through hydraulic gradients, lowering the bearing capacity and shear strength of the clay above them. Sand grains in the Up-North Formation can also contain thin layers of green rust, which have the ability to rapidly strip oxygen out of the air, making tunnelling a life-threatening hazard in these areas. This highlights the future importance of borehole sampling and mapping of individual Lambeth Group beds, a feature which was not possible during this geological model, but it is vital if underground construction works are to become more common within the Lambeth Group. The two pollutants analysed during the environmental analysis portion of the project were PM2.5, or fine particulate matter, and nitrogen oxides. Comparatively to the next two most populated cities in the UK, which are Manchester and Birmingham, areas of high nitrogen oxide concentrations are more common in London, whereas areas with high concentrations of fine particulate matter are consistent with the two other cities. In 2015, King's College estimated that fine particulate matter contributed towards 3,500 premature deaths in London, and long-term exposure to high concentrations greatly affects those with chronic heart or lung diseases, as well as reducing lung function growth in children. Nitrogen oxides, however, contribute towards 5,900 deaths annually, and disproportionately affect a similar demographic. Manipulating data provided by the London atmospheric emissions industry, it is possible to visualise that almost the entire area of London exceeds recommended guidelines for fine particulate matter, but does not cross the legal threshold. High proportions of emissions come from domestic and heat power supply. In areas where this is not the case, there is usually a correlation between fine particulate matter and non-residential building density, suggesting that offices and commercial units also contribute towards the emissions. Nitrogen oxide emissions, on the other hand, however, are heavily linked to transport, with 24% of the area analysed in London exceeding the legal limit in the UK. Areas such as Hyde Park, the Westway, and bridges such as Chelsea Bridge in West London are areas where emissions released by personal transport, which includes cars, motorcycles and taxis, are highest. Furthermore, these three areas show some of the highest density of schools in inner London. The combination of a high exposure of children and high concentrations of nitrogen oxide in these areas has led to them being identified as focus zones by the London Atmospheric Emissions Inventory, which are zones where nitrogen oxide concentrations are over the EU limits and human exposure levels are considered high. Alternatives to commuting into central London from West London by personal transport are already in place, in the form of the Central and Circle lines. However, by creating an extension of the Bakerloo line under Hyde Park, from Paddington to Hyde Park Corner and then on to Victoria Station, would permit access from areas surrounding Paddington to south of the river, without having to take an indirect route around Hyde Park on the District or Bakerloo lines. Although Hyde Park is a protected area, the benefit of reduced emissions in the focus zone would far outweigh any obstructions caused during the drilling process. Geologically, the extension between Paddington and Hyde Park is feasible, with ample thickness of London clay being present, with the base of the clay ranging between 20 to 40 metres beneath the surface. The geological model predicts encountering drift and gravel deposits when drilling close to Victoria Station, which could cause drilling complications similar to those mentioned in the water-bearing quaternary gravel scour hollows in the London clay. Investigating further ground truths about the geology surrounding Victoria would be an area of further development, as the geological model provided less reliable results in the west of London due to the reduced number of boreholes. Furthermore, investigation into any pre-existing tunnel systems beneath Hyde Park would be a necessary requirement before drilling could take place.